Why would a professional body adopt something like ethics?
So that people don't play around with the profession.
Simple, so that profession people don't play around with what they are doing, right? And any professional body is committed to keeping up a simple standard or keeping up a certain level of a bar on its professions. So if you see,
Government.
example, a medical body, when a when a doctor is given a license to practice, when they clear their medical qualification, they take an oath.
Skills over money.
Skills over money. Yeah. Some of you all shared this inputs that, what is the compass by which we will take decisions, what boundaries within which we will operate, and why, what does it mean? So when we say that I am an ICF accredited coach or I'm a credentialed coach versus, I just passed out of a coaching school, or I don't know what coaching I've adapted, I want to call myself a so and so coach versus being a credentialed coach. So what does that mean? And that is where the coaching competencies come in and play the biggest difference, that the global standard to which we are all committing to, or we are taking a pledge to adhere to, that's what the ICF is calling out. And the world is becoming a very sensitive place as things evolve, as leadership evolves, as inclusive human practices evolve, as the compassion for fellow humanity, as well as our own responsibility and commitment to our professions, as these factors evolve, ethics is taking a center stage, not just for coaching, but for almost all professions. If you are a professional and you're credentialed and you are accredited, and I remember saying this before, but ICF is the gold standard. So, what differentiates an ICF accredited coach versus any other coach are our competencies. And ICF starts with saying that whatever you're doing, we must be, as accredited coaches, as credentialed coaches, be committed to ethical practice. Okay. So we've got to understand what ICF means by a professional code of conduct. There are certain interpretations, and there are some standards that they are coming in with, saying that, if you are credentialed and if you want to be a professional who's associated with this body and you are practicing this gold standard, then hey, there are few things here you must demonstrate and comply with in your practice. So this is one of your, and you'll keep hearing this word as you delve deeper into the coaching competencies, you keep hearing the short name, which is CC, core competency. So this is one of the first core competencies that ICF starts with, saying demonstrating ethical practice. Let's look at a little deeper in how does ICF define, what does ICF mean when they're saying we've got to practice ethical code of conduct. Okay. So it is essential to follow and meet ethical standards in work as a coach. There is an underlying set of ethics and principles that both the coach as well as the client can depend on. Okay. And of course, need to be able to apply these to the relationships. So whenever we have a coaching context or a situation that comes in a coaching engagement where there is a gray area or an area where a decision needs to be taken, like a couple of people mentioned, what is the compass that I'm going to be using? The compass I will use is what is defined by the ethical principles by the ICF board. So let's look at the descriptors. Okay. Demonstrate personal integrity and honesty in interactions with clients, sponsors, and relevant stakeholders. How will we get an opportunity to demonstrate integrity in our coaching interactions?
What we say and how we act through our demonstrations.
What we say, how we act. What about how we say and how we act? Great input, Nikunj.
Giving them no room for ambiguity, Robert. So like,
No room for ambiguity.
like we say that if we are going to record a conversation or if we are going to take notes, we clearly tell them upfront that this is what we are going to do. So that sets the ethical line between each other, right? So it sets the principles there.
So there is a certain amount of honesty that is expected from us as coaches. So if we are going to record or take notes, or even sometimes, if you're going to do some amount of reporting or, some amount of sharing that is required, sometimes I may be on my credentialing journey and I need to record a conversation to submit to ICF for evaluation or submit to my mentors for evaluation. Okay. Always do it with sharing upfront with the client. What is the definition of integrity? What do we mean by integrity? I know, and I know we can have our own connections with the word, but let me hear a few takes on what integrity means to you.
Sharing with others,
Honest.
Honest, yeah.
Saying what you do and doing what you say.
What you say, yeah. So keeping up the words, yeah. Whatever you say, you do. Maintaining time, all those things come as a part of it.
Okay. So one is walking our talk. So do what you say and say what you do clearly. Ethics and integrity also to me means being in a certain sense of congruence. What I think, what I say, what I preach, what I propose, especially what I'm telling and expecting a client to come up, be engaged with me. I tell a client, please participate, please, clear your space, please park aside whatever you want to do. Then I must also reciprocate with the same integrity. I must be in congruence with what I'm saying, what I'm expecting the client to do, and what I am doing myself.
Right.
Okay. So ICF says interaction with clients, sponsors, and relevant stakeholders. Okay. So client we know is very easy to understand because that's your coachee. The person I'm coaching is my client. Who's my sponsor? I may have a situation where I have a corporate where the HR of the organization or, the leadership of the organization is designing a structure for coaching and calling in the coach to say that, okay, here we have a cohort or, I have a team member who requires support or who there is a developmental need that can benefit from coaching. So I have a sponsor. Often you will have other stakeholders in relationships. Okay. When you're in a coaching engagement, you may have, for example, I'm working with a sponsor, but I also have the HR as a significant stakeholder. Okay. Or sometimes I come up in my personal network or in my personal contact, I come up in a scenario where I am working directly with a coachee, but I do know some of the key relationships in that person's ecosystem as well. Okay. And they are playing a role in the opportunity or the developmental path that the coachee is taking. So for example, I'm working with a peer of mine or a colleague of mine on a coaching requirement. She's working on a relationship issue, or she's working on a child counseling issue, or she's working on any other life coaching issue, but it's impacting her family, who I also know quite well. So they become invested stakeholders. How does my integrity come into play? I have a coaching relationship with the person I am directly coaching, but I also know or interact with other stakeholders. So can I go to my coachee's spouse and say, hey, you know what? Please support your husband. Please support your wife. She's trying really hard right now. I'm trying to get more support from my client. Is that a right thing to do? Yes, no, maybe.
No, doesn't it depend on who hired you?
Okay, let's find out. Let's hear a little bit more.
Okay, I'm going to relate this to a different scenario. in an organization, if the organization has hired you as a coach for a particular VP or SVP, then in that case, what happens? How does integrity play there?
Are you asking me the question or are you responding?
No, I'm seeking guidance.
Okay.
I'm seeking guidance here.
All right. So what do you think?
Essentially, as a part of coaching, so we should be abide by the coaching guidance, like whatever has been contracted, right? As per the contractual terms only we should be talking.
Okay.
So in that context, when your question becomes definitely void, right?
My question becomes definitely
void.
My question becomes void. Well, let me rephrase my question. My question is a very real question, Raghu. You're working and to Seema's context as well, right? Let me pick up that scenario. So I'm coaching one person. Let's say I'm coaching one sales leader in an organization. I have been enlisted by the HR head and the CEO of the organization because there is a strategy to drive the marketplace presence. There is growth which is in the pipeline. They want to support that growth by building capability in their leadership team. Then they start with, let's support our sales organization to make some breakthrough. And now, so I'm coaching the sales leader, but I have the CEO who's checking with me saying, hey, Meghna, what's happening? I know you've had 2 coaching sessions with my DR. How is it going, Meghna?
You're not supposed to talk this for like you're not supposed to. We should stay by the coaching, ethical behaviors.
Okay, so here's what makes the problem more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO is going to clear my bills, right? Because he's the guy who brought me in.
I understand.
So how do I not report?
Okay, so you should coach. These are the ethical guidelines, and as per that, I'm not supposed to speak on that.
So I'm glad you all are standing up. I'm glad you all are standing up for the confidentiality. Okay? Absolutely. So I should not be. Certainly, I should not be sharing.
The voice is not. You're not audible, Meghna.
Is that me?
Yes.
Yes. Now it's okay now.
Okay, now okay. So I think
Now it's fine. Yes.
Okay, there was some.
Could you repeat what you said? I missed the last part.
Yeah, so I was saying that it's absolutely true that we must stand up for the confidentiality of the coaching sessions, the coaching contract that we have with the particular coachee. Okay, I cannot report what the coachee is saying or what action he's planning or what mental process he's going through to arrive at the actions. Where is he in the journey and so on. Okay, so one of the things that that's required by the code of conduct is you be very transparent with each of the stakeholders. So it's perfectly okay for me to go back to the CEO and say, coaching sessions are going well. Your sales leader is very participative. He's engaged. I've had 2 sessions going on. I think he's really keen to make a difference. He's, he's trying to go beyond and explore what are the possibilities that could make an impact. It's okay to share at that level. It's also okay to share if the coachee has said, yes, I'm okay to share this with my leadership. So if my client says that, yes, I think this is a challenge where I will benefit from having my CEO support. In a coaching session, my coachee tells me that, yes, coach, you know what? I've been struggling with this and I think this is not an issue that I can directly impact. It's organizational. Then you have a chat with the coachee. Do you think it's required? And the coachee says, yeah, but I've tried to bring up this issue. Maybe it will help if even you highlight it. Okay. If the coachee is in agreement and alignment with sharing something, it's okay to bring it to other stakeholders. Otherwise, especially if it's a tripartite agreement of any sort, or if you know any other stakeholders, you must be very transparent and honest with the coachee. That's where your primary accountability and your confidentiality completely applies. To say that, look, this is what I will share. So sometimes you may even say that, okay, if I'm going to bump into, like, I have a very dear friend who would come to me for coaching. And of course, I have known them for decades and I know his wife as well. And of course, if he brings in an issue from his family space, I've heard two different versions of the same issue. Okay, but I cannot breach the confidentiality because it's a coaching conversation. It's not a friendship conversation at that point. And when I'm wearing that hat, that's the hat I need to do justice to. Even in a professional corporate setting, if I'm wearing the hat of a coach, I must come from a place of integrity and be ethics bound to my coachee to not violate anything that has been brought up. Okay, having said that, my integrity also compels me to an extent to be honest with the other stakeholders. So if I see a challenge, if I see something where, my coachee can benefit or what the organization is driving overall can benefit from the sharing, I must seek the coachee's alignment, share my perspective, seek alignment. If that alignment falls in place, I can go ahead and share. If it doesn't fall in place, I must respect the choice. Autonomy will always rest with the coachee. So I must respect the choice made by the coachee. Okay, make sense? So what's the rule of thumb? Do not share. If you feel the need to share, seek agreement from the coachee. Okay, in general, that's the logic that will always work. Second descriptor, be sensitive to clients' identity, environment, experience, values, and beliefs. Okay. Now, this is a new introduction to the ethics. The previous model did not have this component, sensitivity to environment, experiences, values, and beliefs. Okay. So the current code of conduct, the new model that has gotten introduced is actually a big shift towards including cultural sensitivities and more inclusion. From that perspective, we have expanded, ICF has expanded the code of conduct. So we are bringing in an element of identity. How do you think this can play up? Identity, environment, experiences, values, beliefs. Where is this going to show up in your coaching? Seema, are you talking? You're on mute.
No, I'm reading it to understand it.
Okay, okay.
Would it be when you're asking where would it fit? Is it the level of coaching?
Where will it show up in the coaching conversation? I'm asking, how does it reflect? When you're coaching, how does it reflect?
See, one positive could be the choice of words. I mean, if there are two different cultures, one culture reads a word in a different way, then that would be one of the points.
Yeah.
And at times it could be even on the religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And we should be very careful using sensitive words over there. We should ensure neither emotionally, and essentially we are all playing with human beings. So emotion always comes first. So that quotient is taken care by virtue of words, and not hurting. Like it might be the traditional or heritage wise or the religious beliefs. Anything could come in between.
So I second that, and this would also help me in my preparation or in asking questions. What kind of questions would I ask my coachee? Am I sensitive to his environment, being empathetic towards him, and then planning my questions?
Lovely. Great inputs, Raghu. Absolutely agree, Seema. So be sensitive to where the client is coming from. Somebody has been working, multitasking. Someone's a single parent, for example. Someone's going through a particularly hard time because of personal circumstances. Okay, I know that they've had a personal setback, which they're grappling with. They're not able to be true to the actions that they're planning or committing. Okay, I have to be, as a coach, sensitive to what they are dealing with. There might be things going on in the environment that have directly not been said by the client. Okay, so change in leadership is going on. Organization is restructuring. There have been cutting costs. There have been some team members who have been retrenched from the organization. It's playing into what the client is saying, what the client is trying to work on. Okay, things which the client has not directly linked to the issues. Very true, Seema, like you said, that it needs to go into how I ask questions, how I am prepared. Yeah, Seema, you've raised your hand as well. Go ahead.
No, I can wait for you to complete.
Okay. So be sensitive. It could be a very broad context that the client is coming from. It could be values and beliefs that are underlying. So remember the iceberg model. It's possibly not at the surface. It's not something that the client is directly expressing. But you get a sense because of the language, the tonality, the non-verbal cues you're getting from the client that there seems to be something deeper going on over here. Okay. So for example, a client simply tells you that, look, this is not me. I want to make progress on a certain goal. I want to maybe hit the gym, be committed to my fitness goals. I'm not able to, it's just not me. Client says he's willing, client says he's committed. What else could be going on? Meetings right now, people's environments right now in the pandemic are so disrupted. People are reprioritizing to such a large extent because of the current disruption that is going on. So we have to be sensitive. So, in the last few months, I've kind of stopped following up with a lot of my clients in terms of scheduling. Okay, simply because I understand that they have all family members at home. They simply don't have the space and the peace and the quiet to have a coaching conversation. And they, it's not that they're not committed to their coaching objectives. It's just that they're not able to disrupt the rest of the environment around them to carve out what they need for themselves. So I have to be sensitive to that environment being disrupted. Okay. Sometimes you'll have a client who comes in who finds a value conflict. Okay. So I had an insurance client. Insurance companies are extremely performance oriented, sales numbers driven, each number of policy, the premiums going up and, being measured month on month, quarter on quarter kind of a thing. This person was not a bad seller. He wasn't, it's not that he's not good at sales. That's the objective that had come as one of the developmental needs for this person working in an insurance organization. He had a fundamental disconnect that, my organization is focused on driving revenue, not focused on the human compassionate need of the individual. And for me, I'm an empathetic person. Just selling is for me a conflict. Okay. His own value is coming in the picture. And there is something that he needs to, it's a deeper level that he needs to reconcile that, is that premium that the customer is paying for an insurance product, is that not going to be of value or benefit to the customer over a short term, medium term, and a long term period of time? Okay. Until he resolved that, he could not focus on getting better at sales. He fundamentally didn't want to do it. Okay. So your values and beliefs may come into the picture and have a play. That's what we have to be mindful about. So I can't tell the client that, what, this is not about humanity. This is about your performance. No, that won't work. His performance is linked to his beliefs and the compassion he feels as an empathetic person to humanity in general. So unless he makes a peace and comes to an understanding of how the product and what he's offering as a service is adding value, he will not be able to sell. Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead. Seema, you have a question. Go ahead.
No, I did not have a question. I wanted to share something. That's why I said I could wait till you complete.
Okay.
So something where we need to be sensitive. So there are two real life situations. One is a coaching and the other one is counseling. So someone some problem, and we boiled down to a point where he said, she said that the mind is disturbed, and also I wanted to get the meditation thing from her, but I realized that the person does not, it goes against her belief system. Okay.
Meditation.
So then, yeah,
Meditation is
meditation.
not something she believes in. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then the question that I asked was, what is it that would give you the same effect that a meditation does, would calm your mind? So the person said, walking with music on. So does that fit here?
Yeah, sure. If the client is surfacing a disturbance at whatever level, it needs to be addressed before you can get them to focus on taking actions. For sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
My only observation, Seema, would be suggesting meditation is still leading.
No, I did not suggest. I just asked that question. What would be a meditative experience to you and would give you the calmness of mind?
Yeah.
Equal effect, right?
I would still shy away from using even that.
Okay.
Okay. I would say that, okay, what was the best way for you to shift away from this current state to a more productive state or a calmer state of mind where you are able to focus. So when the client chooses to call it meditative walking with music, or client chooses to term it something else, let it be their association. What we want to focus on is what could be a productive, constructive way for you to shift into a more resourceful state.
Okay, sure. Thanks for that input.
Something like that.
Yeah, thanks for that input. And the second one was, there was a woman who has a son. So she did not want to discuss in front of her son. So we had a conversation late night around 11 because she wanted her son to fall asleep. So that was also being sensitive towards it.
Absolutely. That's a great example, Seema. I mean, even I have a lot of such clients who will say, who are late night clients or early morning clients or Saturday, Sunday clients or whatever, because that's the least disruptive time for them, where they are able to clear the space and mentally be available to do a thinking conversation. Okay. And that's something that's, our ability as coaches as to be able to flex to meet that requirement, to meet them halfway, goes a long way in instilling trust that this person is truly invested and truly cares about what I'm working on. That's a great practice, Seema.
Sure. So the question that you said, what's the best way to relax your mind?
What's the most constructive thing you can do, or what will be a useful practice for you to move to a resourceful state of mind? Client is simply saying disturb. Now I'm not going to use the word disturbed in framing my question. I don't want the client to focus on disturb. So you just say that, I would like you to be more resourceful. What would be a good practice for you?
Okay.
And let them choose.
Sure.
And this walking, depending on personal preferences. So again, this is something that you got to be sensitive to, right? Somebody will say, I really love an energetic workout. I'll go for a run. Somebody will say, I'll unwind with music. Somebody will say, okay, if I could just be myself, go to the spa for a, 2-hour session, I'll be good. It depends on where they're coming from. All right. Moving on to the third one. Third.
1 second, I had a question. Nikunj this side.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So you said that we should be sensitive to the values and beliefs of our clients.
Yeah.
But while deep diving to the discussion, if we understand that those values and beliefs are something which are actually stopping the client to grow in their life, and if they change actually those values and beliefs, they will become successful in their life.
Yeah.
And those values or beliefs are actually not inclined to the principled way of living a life. In such cases, what do you do when you know that those are the real hurdles?
There are 2 questions in there, Nikunj. I'll address them separately, okay? I heard 2 questions. The first question I heard was, it's something that is holding the client back.
Yes.
Yeah. So if it is a self-limiting belief, how will you address it? That's the first part I heard. And the second part I heard is if it is the value or the belief that the client has is not the principled way of living.
Yes.
Okay. So the first one is very easy. That's what coaching is about. Okay. All the beliefs that we hold, not all of them are useful to us. Okay. Then that's what our journey of transformation is about. And that's why we have
Right.
such as coaching. So clients will often unpack in the process of exploring their thinking, and as you help them evoke, as you work through them, evoking awareness, etc., they will often discover some that, but this is what is holding me back. And our role as coaches is to evoke awareness, help them explore, mirror back their thinking to them, just to simply understand, is this useful to you at this point in time? Where is it coming from? It's possibly coming from an experience in the past, or it's possibly coming from, a deep impact of somebody you value and things like that. It's perfectly okay. Is it useful to you from the goal that you've set up for yourself, something that is meaningful for you to achieve? Is this useful for you? And choice always autonomy is with the client to make that choice. So our role is, and I
Okay.
don't know if that client is ready at that point in time to discard something that is holding, even it can be a limiting belief, but is the client ready? I don't know what that particular, see, the beliefs that we pick up because they serve a purpose at some point in time. Okay, it is our role to bring to clients awareness that, look, this seems to be the operating pattern. I'm hearing this language. I heard you say this before. And, earlier when you were explaining the actions that you've taken, I noticed you talking about something which gives this kind of a pattern, if I may bring it to your attention. Then it is up to the client to see that, oh, I never realized this about me. Oh, I must shift from here or whatever, right? So I share an example. In a minute, I'll share an example about beliefs. The second part of your question, Nikunj.
Yes, ma'am.
Not, and it's a very sensitive space to be in, and it's a great catch. I'm glad you brought up the question. It is not a principled way to live. And it may be stopping the client from being successful. So give me an example, Nikunj. What could be a scenario where it's not a principled way and it's holding a client back from success?
Like a client feels that to be successful, you need to have talent.
Okay.
But we know that to be successful, it is important to keep trying in life and face failures so that you learn more and grow more. So it is like a principle says that success is you keep trying, but the client feels that talent is required to do something. So this is a limiting belief, but her values, which stops her to become successful.
What value would be coming into play here, Nikunj? It's a nice example. It's something that will often come up in coaching scenarios. So it's a very practical reality for all of us. What value do you think can be coming into the play over here?
Intelligence is inborn, and it's not something which can be developed.
Intelligence is something that is inborn. So you're talking more from a fixed mindset perspective. I don't have the intelligence,
Yes.
I have the talent. Okay.
Yes.
Understood. So it's more of a belief system, Nikunj, for this specific example. Okay. I would shy away from calling it a principle. Principle is something that's very overarching. Principle is something that is infallible, unshakable for a person. Okay. So for example, I'll say that, being brutally honest to me is more important than anything else. That's a principle I follow. Honesty, but no compromise in honesty. No, there is no gray areas. That's an example of a principle. Now, Even if I'm hurting somebody, a team member or a family member in being a discussion, when I'm sharing what's going on, honesty, and it's important to me, Coach Nikunj, when I'm telling you why I did what I did, I'm telling you I did it because it's important to me for being honest, even if it means I have to be brutally honest and somebody is getting hurt. That was not my intent, but principle is honesty. That comes before being it comes much before for me compared to being nice or being diplomatic or sugarcoating things. That would be
Okay.
coming from a principle. But so two slightly different approaches. Okay, as a coach, when I encounter a self-limiting belief or a fixed mindset, we have to resort to evoking awareness. So nobody is a fixed mindset all the time. Nobody is a growth mindset all the time. Okay, we shift between, we are, some places we tend to be more fixed, some places we tend to be more growth mindset. We shift away. In this case, if I encounter a fixed mindset, I will try to focus clients' awareness and energy into tapping a behavior where he has actually been able to make a shift. So when have you had when have you had a most happy learning experience? And the client says, oh, when I was in college and I was passing out and I was really fascinated with computers and I picked up a, coding language. But now I'm struggling with presentation skills. But he didn't know. So I will focus on making him aware that, look, you didn't know coding back then. What did you do to master this skill set? Then say, oh, I had a friend and I did this and we used to attend classes together and I used to, late night, we used to sit at 2 o'clock in the morning and discuss problems and we used to work on projects together and, so he had a buddy, he had this. So make him aware that he was committed, he invested time, he wasn't watching the clock, he was willing to put in late hours. Some of the things that he has done actually to get to a place of growth. Now, what parallels is he able to draw? That's the whole coaching conversation. Where can we tap his energy? But that is coming from that mindset shift. The principle is a little difficult to shake off. Okay, you can't tell a client that, Meghna, being kind is more important. Please understand, you're a professional, you're working in this organization. Please understand, you have a family. You've got to admit that being kind is also as important as being honest. You can't tell me that. It's my belief. It's my principle. It's very innate to who I am. Okay. What you can do as a coach is help me explore in that situation, what are my options? When I'm operating from a particular principle and what is the action I'm taking? What is the impact of that action? What are the other perspectives, options available to me? What are the other choices I can make in that scenario? I don't have to necessarily operate from that principle in that context. What are my other choices? So we can help them reframe. We can talk about, if somebody is, for example, a person you really, really respect, or somebody who would, be able to talk about a really hard-hitting issue in a more diplomatic way. Meghna, would you know anybody like that? Yeah, I know this one aunt who is, so diplomatic. How would she say it? What is that impact that it is causing? Is she able to achieve her objective? What is the impact that she is leaving on the people? Then Meghna realizes, yes, there is another way of doing something without the impact, the adverse impact of that communication. Then you say that, okay, your principle, it's fine, Meghna. I don't think you need to compromise on your principle, but it looks to me like there are other choices that you have available in this context or in this situation. Then again, then you support the client, you help them shift. If they want to shift to a different style of behavior and so on, then you support them. That's how the coaching engagement progress.
Yeah. So the Meghna, just,
Yeah. Go on.
I want to add one aspect. So Meghna has already answered how to deal with the client in these kind of practical situations, and you are going to face this particular situation. But first, I want you to have the coach mindset. What is coach mindset? Now, Nikunj has given us example. That is, Nikunj as a coach believes that to succeed, one requires to try, explore, experiment, fail, then again cope up and succeed, be resilient and all that. And the client thinks that for the success, a person needs a talent. Now, it is the Nikunj worldview that one gets success by XYZ way. It is the client's worldview that the one gets success by ABC way. There is no reason why Nikunj has to be certain that, means, has God came in your dream and told you that is okay, forget about all other ways. I am telling you that this is the way. That is your belief system. Your belief system, everyone thinks that my belief system is a right belief system and it is the right principle. Like that, client also can have his or her belief system, and client also must be thinking that it is the right principle. So you should not think from the perspective of right and wrong. You should not think from the perspective of whether the principle is right or the principle is wrong, because then there is an undercurrent of judgment. Right. So
no, it's not about that. What I am saying is that client has a belief and we understand that this particular belief is not helping the client to
I
grow.
know. So means you have tempered down the example, but I am smelling something, so I am telling for the benefit of everybody. You are very diplomatic in giving the foolproof example so that you will not get caught. I have understood the entire thing, but there is an undercurrent, and that undercurrent I want everyone to understand, that we are no one to say that this is right and that is wrong. We are no one to say that this is a better principle and this is a less better principle, right? So we have to take the things at a face value. Point number one. Point number two, changing the beliefs and all that is important. I'm not denying that. Like Meghna has already stated, that is okay, you have to support client and you have to do certain things. But what is our ideology? Our ideology is appreciative inquiry and looking for the strengths. Okay, client has this particular belief system, but what are the strengths client is having? And can I utilize those strengths so that the client will achieve his goal? That is the point. So that is where your more attention should go. I'm not saying that you should not look at the limiting beliefs. Means if I have to say percentages, maybe 20 to 30% weightage can be given to the limiting beliefs and the negative aspect. But more than 50% weightage must be given to the appreciative inquiry and the strengths client has, and how coach can explore those particular strengths so that the client can realize his or her goal. So these are the, I'm just giving you the message. I'm not pointing Nikunj here, that is okay, Nikunj has this particular thought process, because no one, because I have not gone inside Nikunj's head and taken a photograph. I don't have the proof of what exactly he is saying. I am just taking this leaf to give you one message of being non-judgmental. Do not think that your principle is right and the client principle is wrong. And I want to give you a message that focus more on the strengths.
So you'll basically come down to the principle in Bhagavad Gita. Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha. I mean, we have to stay, unbiased, like, as you say, like, without getting worried what's happening over there. Labha, labha, jaya, jaya. Just lead them into the path of their strengths.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very nice, Raghu.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Hemant. So yeah, because the minute we step into whether the client is right or wrong, or or forget the client also, when they make a statement, and is this the right way to behave, or is this the right belief or principle or value or whatever it is, right? The minute we go into that territory, we have lost our presence as a coach, because then we are applying our brain to say, is this right? We cannot do it without getting judgmental. So that's the point that Hemant was bringing out, that we have to stay into tapping strengths and appreciative inquiry. Great input. Thanks for that, Hemant.
And our mindfulness and active listening is gone there.
Yes. Because the minute our biases come in, see, that's the point, right? The minute I am in the same shoes or opposite shoes, whatever, but I am coming down to the cognition awareness levels of the client, that I'm getting caught up in the issue, the details, the drama, then what is happening to my presence, my remaining non-judgmental, my, staying unbiased, all of that is suspended. So as a coach, I can't lose presence. Okay. All right. The third
Thank
description.
you. Yeah. Thanks, Meghna. Yeah.
Welcome, Nikunj. Thank you, Anupma. Good, Mridu. Thank you. You guys are putting in comments there. Just caught on with the chat box. The third one talks about descriptor, which says that language must be appropriate and respectful to clients, sponsors, and relevant stakeholders. So this particular descriptor to me has two meanings, okay? One is, are we being professional, using clean language, staying in the professional space, etc. You shouldn't say, obviously you're not going to be using slang words, you're not going to use jargon, you're not going to use colloquial language, things like that when you're discussing, when you're either coaching or you're representing your coaching engagement in any way. The other most important, the more relevant from a coachee perspective, the connotation that I have with this descriptor is, what is the client's connection with certain words in language? So when I was saying integrity, even something that is so commonly, it has only a positive association, the word integrity, and we had different inputs that came in from the group, right? When we started the session and said, what is ethics? What does integrity mean? People gave different inputs. So similarly, a client will have some specific associations. Okay. I was doing a coaching assessment last week, and the objective, I had chosen to, do that particular assessment. I was obviously with somebody who was quite new to the space of coaching. I was telling her, I want to shift the qualitative content of my portfolio. I'm kind of operating in my comfort zone right now, and I want to do some different things and whatever. And at the end of the session, she tells me, why don't you have a goal statement, Meghna, that is more inspiring? Shouldn't it be focused on growth? And then as a client, I'm telling her that, look, the whole discussion has been, the whole last 1 hour has been about growth. I'm telling you, I want to get out of my comfort zone. How is that not about growth? Except I have not used the word growth. Okay. So language plays a lot of role when we are coaching in the conversation. No, we will want to paraphrase. You want to highlight what the client is saying. You're mirroring back to what you're phrasing questions of what the client is saying in the conversation. So there are a lot of times when, you are picking up language, meaning, associations. Based on that, you're asking questions. Based on that, you are paraphrasing. So that's the element and the layer I want everybody to be mindful about, that the language must be appropriate from that perspective. What is the client's association? What meaning and connections are they having with the word? Here, the person who was coaching me did not identify that getting out of the comfort zone isn't that growth. And then you're telling me as a coach that, shouldn't you have an objective that focuses on growth? But hello, that's what the goal was all about, right? So understand the client's perspective. And here is where, again, we need to remain present and suspend our own associations with certain words, because we are also human. See, I am a coach, but I'm also a human being. I'm also a person who has my own associations with certain words, with phrases, with my own experiences, right? But when I come into a coaching session, when I put that hat on, I must suspend my associations and pick on what the client is saying. How do we do this? This will tie into your active listening core competency. Okay, it will correlate to your listening skills. All right, let's look at the other ones, the other descriptors, okay? Abides by the ICF Code of Ethics and upholds the core values. Now, this is a document, coaches, which ICF, it's a small document, 3.5 pages. It's there on in your coach study guides. It's also there. You will find it on the ICF website as well. And if you go into the credentialing journey, this is the document, the ICF Code of Ethics. This is first of all a mandatory competency. Whenever you are renewing your credentials, etc., it's a mandatory area that you have to touch upon. You have to have minimum number of CCUs, 3 CCUs. You have to have on the Code of Ethics. It's a training program that's there on the ICF website as well. Your CKA, the Coach Knowledge Assessment, which is the exam that you give in order to get credentialed. Certainly, the biggest part of the requirement is around the Code of Ethics. Okay. Very defined, some specific situations, what you can do, what you can't do, comes in over there. The only disqualifier, the biggest disqualifier, from an ethical principle perspective, what you can do, support client in every other way, listen, everything else is okay. Do not suggest, do not give advice. You can give a suggestion, you can give an idea, do not give advice. That's the only disqualifier. The fifth one we've spoken about, confidentiality. We did speak about that, maintain confidentiality with client information per stakeholder agreements and pertinent laws. Now in India, we do have some privacy laws, but they are not really followed to the T in terms of the legalities and so on. But a lot of countries, Europe, UK, will have very, very stringent data privacy laws, to the extent that if you have a contract with a client, how long can you keep your written notes? How should you be destroying your notes? If you make audio recordings of your coaching sessions, so this comes into play in a lot in the medical profession, in the counseling, psychotherapy, in any therapy stage, etc. Because there are very defined laws about what you can keep on record, how you should be storing these records, how long can you retain the records, when should you destroy them, how should you destroy them, who can they be shared with, in what circumstances can you share personal records of the clients, and so on. Now, what ICF says about confidentiality, do not share with anybody. The qualitative content of a coaching conversation, the questions you are asking, the responses that the client is coming with, challenges, beliefs, whatever they are surfacing is completely confidential. What can you share? You can share the logistical elements as per defined stakeholder agreement. So if you're engaged in a corporate environment where an HR says, okay, you must report what objectives the client is working on, how frequently you're doing your coaching sessions, what are the key outcomes, or at least give me a dipstick on the progress the client is making. Ideally, you would go back to the client and say, here is the form here. Can you see? These are the 4 fields that your organization requires me to update. Let us have our coaching conversation. I will not report anything unless both of us jointly agree that this can be shared. Okay. Many coaches will have a coaching conversation and will have a joint version that they will agree with the coachee that, look, this is what I will be sharing. Do you want to edit anything, change anything, or leave anything out? Okay. And anything that the client brings in that, please communicate that, these are my challenges, or please HR needs to support me with so-and-so thing, or my leadership needs to provide me with certain more opportunities to practice for the actions that I'm taking, and so on. That is something that the coach will share appropriately if that's a ask from the client. Is the second example, the second part, is that clear? Or would you want me to talk a little bit more about it?
If you can please detail, that will be helpful.
Okay, sure. So sometimes what will happen is, especially in the executive coaching space, what will happen is the client is part of, your coachee is part of an entire ecosystem. Okay. And the objectives and the goals that they have set up for themselves, or sometimes there is an input from the organization also that they have defined for themselves. Now that input requires them to take certain actions. Through their support in coaching, they have designed some actions which they think will move them towards their objective. In order to take these actions, some actions may be completely within the circle of influence of the coachee himself or herself. They can take 5 actions. If I'm supposed to read up, if I'm supposed to go to a learning management system, I'm supposed to do some training programs, I have to upskill myself, I can do it myself. But when I'm trying to sharpen my presentation skills, there's a part of learning, upskilling that I need to do, but I must finally also get opportunities to present. How will I know I'm getting better, right? Now, the client may ask for your help as a coach to say that, I'm not getting opportunity. I don't know whether I'm actually progressing, or I don't know actually how much the needle has moved because I haven't had an opportunity. So the next time I'm having a high stake customer discussion, I would like to lead the pitch so that I can test where I am. Okay. And that is where the coach may be required to go and enable that support in the ecosystem. You can do it in 2 ways. You can either reach out to the right stakeholders to enable that support. You can also work with the client to make a plan that aligns the other stakeholders, whichever the client chooses. Okay, whatever they are more, if they are able to align and enlist support for themselves, that's the best thing, because you are only there for the structured engagement and they must have a mechanism to sustain it. If they are not comfortable doing that at that stage and they require support to enable opportunities, with the consent, you can share that ask on their behalf.
Yeah, with example, it become very clear. Thank you. Thank you very much.
But everything else remains confidential.
Same thing. Yeah.
Clients' beliefs, personal sharing, family life, medical history, anything can come up, and it all stays only with the coach. Also be very clear, I'm very mindful of, I do take notes. When I do coaching work, I've been a writer. So when it's my learning style, it's my, it's my way for me to stay attentive. So I am a compulsive note taker. I'll inform my clients upfront that I'm taking notes. At the end of the conversation, I'll share my notes with you so that you also have a record of what I'm writing. At the end of our engagement, I will destroy the notes. Sometimes a client will say, hey, Meghna, just take an image and can you WhatsApp it to me? And sometimes when they start writing also, I will offer and remind them that, can I offer to be the scribe for you on this one? You don't have to, you can just stay in the conversation, focus on the thinking. I'll give you the notes. So you may be doing that, keeping notes, but then be very transparent. How long will you keep them? Again, keep them. If you do take notes, please be mindful of how you're going to use them. Like little bit of your own planning and organizing skills come into play with taking notes. So this is out. I'm just going a little bit outside of the ethical principles, but I'm just sharing my own experience. Okay. I used to be a spiral notebook person. And then, with multiple clients, you realize that, you are scrolling through pages to go back. When did you last connect? Okay, I spoke on the 3rd of July. Before that, I spoke on the 18th of June, that kind of a thing. So now I keep client-wise notes organized. I may use loose sheets and I keep them. So whatever you're doing, it's part of your prep. But if you're doing that and keeping notes, figure out a way to keep yourself organized in a way that's useful to you. And coming back to the ethics, be very transparent in sharing with the client. And especially if you are recording a conversation, be very, very mindful of sharing that and taking permission upfront. If the client consents, go ahead with the recording. If a client, again, choice must always be made by the client. If they say, no, today's conversation is, I'm not in a place where I want to be recorded, we can't record that conversation. Same thing is true for your coaching log, by the way. If you're capturing that, if I'm saying I have coached Raghu from the 1st of July 2021 to the 30th of August 2021, and I have put in Raghu's name in my coaching log that gets submitted to ICF eventually for credentialing, Raghu must consent to his name being captured on the coaching log. Okay, what I'm sharing with ICF eventually is the name of the client, the contact coordinates of the client, including their phone number, maybe an email ID. But it is underlying, it's implicit that the client has consented to being recorded on the coaching log. If a client says, no, I don't want to get a query on this, I don't want to declare that I'm using coaching, or I don't want to be part of any log anywhere, then you cannot capture the client on the coaching log. Okay, one more place where you have to be respectful of their need for confidentiality. So what I would do, typically what I would do is I will tell them that, since I am a practicing coach, and in furthering my coaching journey, one of the things that I'm measured on is the number of coaching hours I have delivered. So I keep a very simple record of the name, dates, and the number of hours. I do not ever capture the topic of coaching or the nature of coaching or any details of our conversation. All I will capture is your name, number, and email ID. And when did we start and finish our coaching? If you're comfortable, I'll capture it on the coaching log. And if you are not okay with it, then I will skip capturing it. Mostly clients will say yes, but you have to, because if your application comes up for scrutiny and one of your client gets a call, you don't want to be in a place where somebody says, no, I wasn't aware what coaching log. Okay, you don't want that situation. So again, you have to respect confidentiality, and ICF implicitly says the coaching log must be consented to by the coaching clients. Okay, so something again to be mindful about. Okay, again, coming back to our principles, principle number 6, maintaining distinction between coaching, consulting, and psychotherapy and other support professions. So I think we did speak a little extensively in my last session about this. If the situation warrants the support of another professional, it's not a coaching context, then you got to refer them out. Yeah. I call sharing my own example, one of my client experiences. So if it's not a coaching scenario, or if they are not in a place in their experience, if they are not in a place where they're going to derive value from coaching, it's best to get them the other support. And finally, when you are referring to people as to other support professionals, there is a little bit of an element on responsibility that we have, that we determine appropriateness of any such reference. So I can't just tell a person that, maybe you need a counselor or you need a psychotherapist. I don't know. Okay, there is an element of responsibility I have to my client to determine what is the appropriate support that is required for them. If somebody's got thoughts of self-harm, I've got to refer them to a psychologist. If somebody is processing grief, loss, turmoil, they've got to go to a counselor. Okay. So I need to determine which is an appropriate support at where they are, and then refer them out accordingly.
But as a coach, we can wear multiple hats also, right?
Yes, we can, as long as it's completely okay to do that, as long as we do justice to the hat that we are currently wearing. If I am trained, if I can do justice to what the client is experiencing, if I am equipped, qualified to deal with that scenario, it's fine. I can go ahead. My responsibility as a coach is to tell the client that, look, I'm no longer going to be your coach. Let me pause the coaching. Let me support you by counseling right now.
Yeah.
Let me support you by, whatever. If I'm a trained physiotherapist, I can support them. If there is a requirement, I'll say, okay, you know what? You are in distress right now. You need to physically get rehabilitated first. It's okay. I'm trained. I am a trained physiotherapist. I'll help you with this. Or I'm a trained psychologist, or I'm a trained counselor, whatever. It's perfectly fine. But when I switch hats, and I'm no longer a coach at that point in time. Once the issue has been adequately addressed, where in my professional capacity as a counselor, I'm comfortable for coaching to resume, and the client feels comfortable to resume, client has been able to shift out of whatever situation that, whatever corner that they were in, then it's okay, come back to coaching.
So how with respect to ethics, and this is just a thin layer, right? So we are different hat we are wearing, and there is an ethic, we should not provide solution. But as a counselor or a therapy, we need to provide some solution. So in that case, with respect to ethic, ethics, how we have to.
So how do you take care of, how do you address the ethical requirement? If you have to switch hats, is by being completely transparent with the client and say, I'm going to pause coaching right now.
Okay.
Okay. See, a lot of places, even mentorship will come into an overlap. A lot of leadership development programs, and I work a lot in the executive space. Okay. You're also mentoring people. You're coaching people. You're also mentoring people. You're also training people.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, when I'm a trainer, I'm not a coach. When I'm a mentor, I'm a mentor. I'm neither a trainer nor am I a coach. When I'm a coach and nothing else. Okay. But what hat you're wearing and what is appropriate in that conversation, that we have to be transparent about, we have to be very upfront about. And if when I'm in a coaching session, if somebody asks me for advice, I'm going to say that, sure, I'm happy to share my experience at the end of the session, or I'm happy to share my experience very briefly, but what will be of more value to you is to explore what is relevant for you to make progress. Because a lot of generic goals, everybody will say leadership development. What's your experience? Losing weight. You work with so many people. What is your experience with other clients? What do they do? Why should I think about my actions? Thinking is a very, it can seem very daunting when people are starting out on a coaching journey. The ability to think, we are lazy thinkers. Okay, let me just put it that way. That human beings, if we can shy away, we will shy away from doing the thinking activity. If somebody can feed us saying, okay, do this thing, we want a prescription. The problem is we don't own the prescriptions. So it doesn't work. And coaching says do not prescribe for that simple reason, because simply it doesn't work.
So what was your experience when you will be coaching a person? Maybe initially, maybe in order to understand the problem statement, maybe whatever he may be telling may not be true, or he himself may not be aware of it. So with respect to your experience, initially, definitely you must have wear a different hat. So how much of combination you have worked, and definitely at the end, we should be ending with the coach notes. So how about those hat shift with respect to your experience?
So I never shift hats without a plan, Lakshmi. That's the simple way to do it. Okay. There are organizations where I'm also facilitating and I'm also the coach. Sometimes there are different people. I'm training a set of people on a specific developmental need, and I'm coaching a different set of people on a different developmental need, and that's perfectly fine. There are times when I have an overlap happening, or there is a leadership journey where I am doing both training and coaching as a part of an overarching plan. It's perfectly fine. But my stated agenda, when I set up a schedule and when I set up a calendar, when the people are invited to engage with me, they are very clear, because I am very upfront that are they coming in for a training session? Are they coming in for a mentoring session? Or are they coming in for a coaching session? Okay. I don't typically mentor when I'm training, but yes, but training and coaching often overlaps, because it's, you have designs. I do often propose designs which involve elements of both, okay, which involve training as well as coaching, but it's always calendared, scheduled, and there is no confusion. Why are you here to meet me? There's a group of 10 of you. You are here for a training conversation, and I will deliver training. And I am there. I am the person who you are listening to. When I'm wearing the coach hat, I'm visible a lot less. I'm asking, I'm checking in, I'm figuring out where you are, and so on. I'm not giving inputs at that point in time. And it's typically my coaching sessions are one-on-one, even if they are group sessions sometimes. That's the session where I am not giving inputs. I'm very clear on how I run my individual coaching or group coaching, whatever it is, versus how I run my training versus, there is no overlap there. Agenda is very, very clear. Sorry, I do see a couple of hands raised. Mridu, you raised your hand a while ago. Go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am. So how can we actually decide the right kind of support the coachee needs, whether it's a psychiatrist, psychotherapist, or psychologist, or even a counselor? There's a difference between all of them. So how do we know?
Absolutely. So do a little homework and be prepared yourself. Also invest a little time in building up a reference group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. what kind of problems would go to a psychiatrist versus a psychologist, what kind of problems would go to a counselor, what kind of problems would go to any other support profession, right? Do a little homework, keep 3 or 5 typical use cases for each of these support professions, and more importantly, keep a either keep a reference group of fellow coaches where you can, if you are not sure, you can check in with one of your peer coaches to say, hey, you know, I have a case like this. I seem to have encountered a situation that warrants a refer out. What would you be doing? You know, take a second opinion if required, that kind of a thing. Or check in with the concerned professionals and look, this, without sharing any client details, that this seems to be the scenario with a client. Is this something that would fall under your professional purview? In which case I will refer the client. I will then seek consent of the client before you actually connect the two professionals. We may or may not be qualified sometimes, which is why I'm suggesting the mechanism, either check in with a few fellow coaches or check in with the concerned professionals themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Seema.
Yeah, so I've got one clarification and a question. You mentioned that coaching log details have to be consulted for by the client. They have to say yes. Now, the buddy coaching that we are doing, are these different from that 100 and 500 hours of coaching that we're going to log?
You can capture buddy coaching hours if you're doing peer coaching in the IC.
We are not seeking consent of anybody. We are just, because we are divided into buddy coaching group, we are just putting it everywhere.
Yeah, but if you're capturing it in your coaching log, if you're coaching me, I'm one of your buddy coaches, please have that conversation and say that, look, Meghna, I'm coaching you as a part of this practice. We have worked for 8 coaching sessions together. I'm going to be capturing 8 hours in your name. Is that okay? Let Meghna say yes.
Okay. Okay. And the second question is, I heard you say that if you're qualified, if you are trained and certified as a counselor or different roles, you can switch to different hats. It's just that you got to inform the client that now I'm not going to coach. Does it fall under the purview of integrity? Wouldn't be if I just seamlessly, because client does not really know what coaching is or what counseling is. Can't I seamlessly move from counseling to coaching and then from coaching to counseling, mentoring, then back to coaching? Has integrity or ethics got to do something with it?
Yeah, the short answer is you can't. That's what Code of Conduct is saying, that you've got to distinguish.
Okay.
To get the point number 6, maintain distinction. How will you maintain distinction? You can't seamlessly switch. You have to maintain distinction. So it's okay to switch if you are qualified to make that switch professionally. It's okay. ICF is not saying that if you are coaching a client, you can't counsel him. If you're coaching a client, you cannot mentor him. No, but you must maintain distinction. The client must understand that I am no longer being coached. Now I'm being consulted. Now I'm being counseled. Now I'm being mentored. Now I'm being supported by whatever.
So could I request you to tell me verbatim, what would I tell the client? If let's say I'm coaching and I'm also certified as a counselor. So now I'm getting into counselor's role. So what do I tell the client?
So you tell the client that, you know what, Meghna, I get a sense that the issue that you are dealing with is kind of overwhelming at this point in time. Is that a right reading? Am I correct in understanding? I get a sense that you're processing a little bit too much, too many, you are overwhelmed, or there is a lot of emotional undercurrent over here, whatever you are noticing, right? There is a turmoil, there is a shift in energy, your energy is dropped, whatever you are noticing actually with the client, you surface your observation. And if you have a suggestion, then you just say that, Meghna, I'm also a trained counselor. And may I share a suggestion? It seems to me that what you're processing right now, with the amount of grief that you're processing right now, I get the feeling that perhaps you will benefit a lot more from counseling at this point in time. What I may recommend, if that's okay with you, what I recommend is we put a pause on coaching for a little while until I can help you process this. And once we are comfortable, and once I also get a sense that you're comfortably processed and you are regulated emotionally, we can resume our coaching. Is that okay with you, Meghna? Meghna says yes, you switch. Meghna says no, you've got to understand what Meghna really wants. Offer, if you are qualified as a counselor, offer counseling. If the client needs counseling, offer. But you've got to maintain the distinction. You have to tell the client that, Meghna, you are not in a state where you will derive value. I get a sense as a coach that you're not deriving value from coaching. What do you think? First of all, check where they are. Do you think you will benefit more from counseling? I can support you. I will switch hats for the time being, or I will switch from a coach. I'll stop being a coach for a few next couple of our conversations. I'll support you from a counseling perspective. Is that okay? See, again, if you're a professional, you're going to charge money for your counseling, coaching, whatever you're doing, right? It's not as simple as switching hats. The client has to agree what they're paying for, right? So you can't just, without informing them, be charging them for 5 coaching sessions when you're doing 2 coaching sessions and 3 counseling sessions. It's incorrect. That's unethical. That's when we are losing integrity in what we are saying and doing, right? So that is not appropriate. Make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Varun, go
Thank
ahead.
you. Thank you.
Welcome, Seema. Varun,
Yeah.
you still got your hand up, or you've forgotten to lower your hand? I think 3 hands up.
For me, I have a question actually, Varun, this side.
Yes, Varun.
So see, my point is, see, when you are suggesting someone that now I think we are crossing the coaching boundary and now this is a different boundary, right? Maybe you need a psychiatrist or whatever. And whenever you're giving this suggestion, right? Like I'm telling this to Meghna, and Meghna says, no, I don't need a psychiatrist. And whereas you know that she needs a psychiatrist, right?
Yeah.
Then what do you do? Like, because when we are going through that ethics line, right, where we'll not go beyond the coachee. In this case, can we approach someone else and say this, or like how do you approach this?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is the only situation where you are allowed to confidentiality is when the client is in a state of mind where they are going to cause harm to themselves or to any other entity.
Okay.
That is the only exception where you are allowed to breach confidentiality only to that extent.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, Raghu, go ahead.
So, Meghna, okay, like there are few things which we can certainly, understand. It might be by words, it might be by their body language or how they are responding.
Yeah.
But at times they'll be very, very thin. I mean, you may not be able to really differentiate. And of course, like it takes time. It takes a good amount of experience to get onto that stage, to capture something like that happening.
Yeah.
Is there any guideline from ICF or any like, okay, so here are a set of things which you should know so that you get to do a better recognition or something like that?
Better recognition of what support professions are you asking, Raghu? Okay, so don't worry too much about it. Okay, understand from an ethics requirement perspective that we have to maintain the distinctions. But these are really exception cases. 80 to 90% of the coaching scenarios that you will get will be straightforward coaching. In fact, even 95, I can easily say 95. There are a few cases where you will encounter scenarios like this. I'll also be very honest in saying that the first sense you will get, Raghu, is this is not coaching. Be mindful of that. Then the second step is to determine what is appropriate. Okay. Your first filter is, okay, this is not something that can be, this is not a coachable context. If you get that sense, then half the job is done. Then you're able to sensitize the client, then you're able to reach out to other professionals and so on. Okay. Yes, Varun, you still got your hand up. Is there another question?
No, that's my mistake. I'll just put it on.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Okay. So moving on, a little mindful of the content also that we need to cover. The code of ethics document that I was talking about, it has 5 main parts. Okay. It has an introduction about what the code of ethics document is about, some key definitions, roles, and so on. It talks about what are the ICF core values and principles. Then it talks about ethical standards and a pledge. Okay, now if you're getting credentialed, all of us will take that pledge. It's an online pledge which all of us will take, that I agree to abide by this code of ethics as a coach. Okay, something that we need to be aware of. Let's look at what ethical standards mean. Okay, these three elements are definitions and the values. Ethical standards is what we will end up practicing. Okay, so I leave you a minute to skim through. And this is where I also had a question on what is CKA. Okay, CKA is nothing but your coach knowledge assessment. It's an exam, it's an online exam. If you choose to get credentialed from ICF, whether ACC, PCC or MCC, at any point of time when you choose to get credentialed, you need to submit 3 broad elements. Okay, the first one is your training hours. Are you trained professionally as a coach on a program that is aligned to the ICF core competencies? Secondly, have you been mentored on these coaching competencies? And third, have you practiced? Are you able to demonstrate coaching practice adequately? So these are the 3 things that you will need to broadly declare at various levels in each of the journey. So for example, ACC will say 65 training hours, PCC will say 125 training hours, MCC will say 200 training hours. Similarly, you have 10 hours of mentoring between ACC, PCC, you have another 10 hours requirement for MCC. You'll have 100 hours for ACC, coaching log, 500 hours for PCC and 2,500 hours for MCC. Okay, that's the requirement. Yeah, I know. 2,500 is a lot. Yeah.
Can you repeat, please? Sorry. The last one.
You have 3 primary requirements: training hours, mentoring hours, coaching log. Coaching log, the last one which I said, is the requirement for ACC is 100 hours of coaching. For PCC, it's 500 hours of coaching. And for MCC, it's 2,500 hours of coaching. Okay.
Thank you.
So, most welcome. So when you choose to do, so these are the 3 things that you need to declare as documents that you need to share with ICF. When you apply for credentialing, you pay your fees and you purchase the application, you submit your records of training, mentoring, coaching log, all of that. You also have to give an online exam, the CKA, the Coach Knowledge Assessment. Coach Knowledge Assessment is based primarily on only 2 things: Code of Ethics and Core Competency Model. Okay, so that's what I meant when I said CKA. It's the Coach Knowledge Assessment exam that you have to give for credentialing. All right, let's look at a little briefly. Let's touch upon what ethical standards are. It is our responsibility. Sorry, yeah, Tyagarajan, go ahead.
Yeah, the CKA exam is for how many hours and how many questions? Like
150 questions, 3 hours. It's an online exam, multiple choice questions. It used to be to date, yet it is an online exam. Once you apply, once your application is reviewed and accepted by the ICF, you will get a link which is valid for 60 days. You get a 2-month period after your application being accepted by ICF to give the CKA exam. Within the next 60 days from once you get that mail and the link in the mail to answer the exam, you have to register yourself. It's an online exam center. They have a virtual kiosk to give an exam, which means you can't keep any other tabs open. You can't Google, you can't keep your, ICF website or any other site open to help you. So it's a virtual kiosk environment in which you give the exam. You have 150 questions, multiple choice. You have a 3-hour window to do it. Okay.
Is it for ACC or PCC, MCC? The exams are one exam.
One exam, one time in your journey, you need to give the exam once. That's the current requirement. Whether ACC, PCC, MCC, it's the exam has to be given, CKA has to be given only once. Minimum pass percentage is 70.
Thanks, man.
You have to clear it with a minimum 70%. Only 2 documents you need to study: core competency and code of ethics. Okay. To give the exam. To give your CKA, those are the only 2 things you need to study. And all of this information is there on the ICF website. Okay, you don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. It's all there. Okay. Sorry, guys, little bit mindful of the time. We are at about 6:30. I just want to quickly skim through the ethical standards. Again, when you're looking at the code of conduct document, this is the part that is the most extensively described by ICF, okay? It has 4 parts: responsibility to clients, which is the longest part, responsibility to practice and performance, responsibility to professionalism, and responsibility to society. These are the 4 elements under ethics. Let's look at responsibility to clients. Understand the nature and potential value of coaching. And here, Seema, to your question, you can't go seamlessly. You have to understand, you have to explain to them the nature and potential value of coaching. Create an agreement or a contract regarding the roles and responsibilities. Maintain strictest levels of confidentiality. Clear understanding of how information is exchanged among all participants. All interested parties about the conditions under which information will not be kept confidential. If you are an internal coach, so if you're an internal coach in an organization, manage conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest within coaching clients and sponsors. Maintain, store, dispose records. So this is what we were talking about earlier, including electronic files, communications created during professional interactions in a manner that promotes confidentiality. This is our responsibility to clients. Yeah, Tyagarajan, is there a question? Go ahead. Oh, you've forgotten to lower your...
I forgot to, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. Yeah, this is fairly straightforward, nothing challenging. These are simply things that we must adhere to, okay, because this is part of our defined standard. Remain alert to indications in there may be a shift in value received from the coaching relationship. This is an important one to understand, shift in the value received. So it may be that as the coaching engagement progresses and as the client starts to hardwire new habits, new behaviors, shift in habits and so on, the value may be perceptibly increasing for the client. They may be able to apply, integrate their learning to other aspects of their life. And ideally, this is the shift that you want to create. Okay. That they start with a stated value which is smaller in scope, and as the relationship progresses, the scope expands. The scope of the value delivered through coaching expands. Now, in case this is not true and the reverse is true, we are in trouble. We need to course correct. Be mindful. If this is not true and your client feels otherwise, then there is a problem and we need to fix it.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, so the statement from the coachee will be a little bit, or the value recognition will be a little bit. We basically expand it by means of coaching.
No. The stated value or the stated objectives. So remember, when we are talking about coaching, what's happening is there is a transition that the client is making. There is a journey they are making, A to B. They come in with a stated objectives, saying, whatever, I want to improve my capability. I'm at currently this level. I want to go to that level, or I want a promotion, or I want a growth in this area, etc. Whatever their stated goal is. So there is an element of transition that is happening. But as they are exploring, as they are discovering who they are, their connection, and so on and so forth, there is also a transformation journey that is going on. The person is also evolving beyond the stated objective. Okay. So, which would mean that along with the transition that the client is going through, the transformation will expand the value that they receive overall. And that's how it should be. That's how coaching engagement should work. It should work at a deeper level, connect with the whole person and so on.
Right. Yeah.
If that is not the case and the reverse the case, then it's a red flag for the coach. So be aware if your client, so this is something we can check in with client from time to time. If they feel otherwise, then we've got to do some course correction. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Welcome. Any party can terminate the coaching relationship, including the coach or the coachee. So your contract must provide for a clause of termination by either parties. The sponsor can terminate the coach or the coachee can terminate the agreement. If it's not working for whatever reasons, they must have it. Either of the parties can have the right to terminate. The coach must be sensitive to the implications of multiple contracts and multiple and same clients and multiple relationships. So if I have a client relationship where I'm doing training as well as coaching, then I must be very sensitive that there are multiple contracts, or my same clients, I have multiple relationships. So our discussion, where is it coming from? You know, what we were talking about, Seema, that I can't, without informing the client, without showing them the distinction, because I have to be sensitive to the implications of having, I'm so sorry. The coach must be sensitive to the implications of having multiple contracts and multiple relationships with the same clients, yet avoid conflict of interest. So when I'm coaching, I can't be coaching around something that I have not, that contradicts what I'm training them on, and vice versa. Or I can't counsel them in a way that takes them back in their stated objective. You know, something like that. Then the coach must be aware of and actively manage power or status difference between the client and the coach that could be caused by cultural, relational, psychological, or contextual issues. Okay, and this is something that will very often come up in the executive coaching space. If you work with people, okay. Now, very often what happens with coaching leadership, the guy who's sitting in the coachee role is somebody who's gray haired, who's sitting in a CXO role, who thinks he's an expert, who's a CTO, CIO, CFO, CO, CEO, whatever, right? They have 20, 25, 30, 27 years of experience. And this is a big psychologically, it's a big advantage that they come into the relationship with the coach. They come in and they dictate saying, you know, I just need this, this, this. Okay. As a coach, you have to be mindful of and manage it actively. So I'm not here to do, I'm here to coach whoever it is. If it's a CXO, it's a CXO. You are a great financial wizard. You are a CA ranker. Good for you. I'm not here to take up financial management of the organization. I'm not here to do FP&A for your company. Okay. So be mindful and actively manage that. Otherwise, it will dilute your coaching. Okay. You will not be able to make the impact. Disclose to clients. Yeah. Is there a comment, Tyagarajan? Sorry.
Basically, I wanted to say I had an exact similar situation 2 weeks back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I have to take them. I have to do a coaching session, telling what is coaching and what are the guidelines of coaching and what are the contractual agreements.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's always so. I always keep 10 minutes to talk about what coaching is in the chemistry session. Okay, sometimes clients have not experienced coaching. Sometimes, they think they are the, God's gift to the whole world, whole mankind, and that's fine. But they don't know what to expect from the coaching. They don't know what their own role and responsibility is. They have to think, they have to come up with their actions. They have to commit to their actions in order to move forward, right? That's number one. And number two, sometimes they have experienced coaching, but with a very different coach. Somebody who has a very different coaching style. So it's also an opportunity for us to create that alignment when you're doing the chemistry session. So talk to them about, look, this is how I work, I operate from this. Or, sometimes if you're using a coaching specialty or there is a go-to modality that you favor. So if you use, for example, heavily use psychometrics or heavily use emotional intelligence or NLP, whatever it is, right? It's a good time at good place in the chemistry session to educate the client that, as a coach, great, you've experienced coaching. That's lovely to hear. How did it work? What was your overall experience like? But this is my style. I also thought that, it'll be good for you to know how I typically coach and, this is my preferred style. So you'll hear a lot of questions of this kind, or I may bring in some tools around this nature or whatever it is. It's a good thing to educate them. Of course, if there is okay, I think he's not aware. All right. Disclose to clients if there is any other compensation that you are receiving. So for example, if you're referring a client to a counselor and the counselor is going to pay you a reference fee, or you require the client to go through a psychometric assessment, which the client is going to pay for, but the platform is going to give you a reference fee because you are recommending a certain psychometric. Okay, then you have to disclose it upfront to the client. That's a requirement of the ethical standard. Or you refer the client to a nutritionist or a dietitian for that matter. Okay, you say, okay, you know, there's a great personal trainer that I know. He'll come home and he'll help you with your fitness goals. But if you have a financial merit with that person, with that other professional, then you have to disclose that to your client if a third party is paying you any other fees. Okay, and ensure consistent quality of coaching regardless of the amount of time or form agreed compensation in any relationship. And this is very, very interesting. You know what will happen? Sometimes a client will call you back after the coaching engagement is over. You strike a relationship with them. You're speaking to somebody for a period of 3, 4, 5 months. You've had 10 sessions, 12 sessions with them. After everything is over, they were working on something. They've come to a certain milestone. When they hit the next milestone, they will call you. You know what, Meghna, I just wanted to share something with you. And they're so excited and they'll take up half an hour to just share with you. And then they will also tell you that now that I've come here, Meghna, I think the next logical milestone for me would be to start working on this one now. Okay. If you engage in that conversation, now you may not be engaged by the same sponsor. It may be paid. Client may be wanting to engage you in his personal capacity. But if you do decide to engage, then regardless of the change in payment, you know, if there is a drop, if there is an increase, whatever is going on, the quality of the coaching that you are providing must remain consistent. Very often, you know, I will throw in 1 or 2 complimentary sessions at the end of the engagement, simply because client, there are some actions that they may be taking which won't get completed in a 3-month window. And they will come back and then they will want to have a session that talks about what the progress they've made. Can you validate this for me? And so on. Okay. You have to ensure that you still approach the session in exactly the same structure, confidentiality, questions, exploration, the whole coaching structure, regardless of there being no compensation at all. Okay. That's our responsibility to the clients. Then ethical standards talk about the responsibility to your own practice and performance. So is it enough to just become a credentialed coach? No. Once I become a credentialed coach, I do have to fulfill the responsibilities towards the practice and performance standards. So adhere to the code of ethics in all interactions. Request adherence of all the support personnel. So if you have other people, if you have an admin person who's managing your schedule and calendaring, they cannot disclose that calendaring at random, at will to any third person, because they are breaching, then they'll be breaching confidentiality. If somebody is typing up a report, okay, if you're making audio notes and somebody is making your coaching report, tracking your reporting, they cannot share what they hear. They have to maintain confidentiality, and you have to share that upfront, that I do have a team that supports me. Okay, same thing if it's going to other people in the client's ecosystem. Commit to excellence. This is the most important one, okay? And this is why the coaching credentials are called the CCE units, continued coach education. This is something that ICF talks about all the time, that you have to commit to excellence through continued personal, professional, and ethical development. Whether you are a PCC, MCC, ACC, whatever you are, you have to be keeping yourself relevant as the standards evolve, as coaching practices evolve, code of conduct evolves. In the last 2 years, the code of conduct has also been updated, ethical standards have been revised, and the competency model has been upgraded. Okay. So if somebody is not kept in touch, then they are practicing something that's gone redundant in the last year or so. So ICF is going to continue to evolve, and we've got to keep up with developing ourselves personally, professionally, as well as ethically. Okay. Recognize personal limitations and circumstances. If I am myself undergoing something that I can't process, if it's going to impair, conflict, or interfere with coaching performance or my professional coaching relationships, I must be mindful as a coach that this is my personal limitation. Okay, it's pretty straightforward, but these are critical. These are responsibilities that are upfront defined. Yeah, Deepak.
Hi, Meghna. One question: that will there be any support structure by ICF where, let's say, when I talk about my personal limitation or continuing improving myself, where I can get that kind of space and environment?
There are many forums, Deepak, which are centered around deepening competencies, primarily your core competencies. Yes, there are. So there is a lot of content, resources, training, videos. Every time ICF has even a small upgrade, there is an elaborate cycle that they practice. They will announce what changes are coming, when they will be rolled out, what will be the impact on practitioners, which entities in the coaching ecosystem are impacted. Is it the clients, where what we need to do differently as coaches? So it's going to be a long, very transparent, very well documented process that ICF follows typically. And if you spend a little time on the ICF training pages, right, there are two things that will be of superlatively of value. One is that ICF has a lot of local chapters globally. Okay, and it publishes a global calendar of events. So if you want to pick up any specific area of development for yourself, if it's ethics, for example, or particular competency or a particular niche, you will find the ICF calendar where you can attend a lot of live sessions, webinars, and so on. That's one. And two, the training resources in terms of research that ICF publishes. You can participate in that research if you put your hand up. If you become a member and put your hand up, you can participate in a lot of research. But more importantly, whatever research ICF does and publishes is available to all members. There's a whole plethora of resources on the website for self-development.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Nama.
Meghna, is there a fixed, when we're talking about signing a contract between the client and you, is there a fixed format by the ICF that we can just, put that forward and maybe then add a few things on your own, which is very suitable to the...
Yeah. So there is actually there is no ICF website, Nama, because what ICF recognizes is as a global body that it has to respect the law of the land in the respective regions, in the respective countries. Okay, so whichever nationality you are practicing in, you have to be mindful of the law of the land to get into something that is legally viable as a contract. There is a recommended contract structure that has been given in your coach study guide. You could refer to that and edit it wherever you feel the need.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, quick question. So from ICF perspective, do they have any suitability assessment? Like these are all the things will come under predominantly on coaching. These are all will be predominantly under counseling. These are all will be predominantly under like that. So are they having any suitability assessment?
There are articles and white papers available, Lakshmi.
Okay.
There are white papers which are published by ICF.
Yeah, where I'm coming from is like okay, in kind of relationship counseling is better or relationship coaching is better. I'm just throwing something here. Okay. Okay. There and on, a coach will be suitability. I think they must be doing some survey or by asking some question, which are all the like perfectly fine with respect to this executive coaches, all those things. But again, so some of the techniques we need to be following in order to fulfill from the other angles other than coaching angles, in order to solve, like you have really mentioned that they are with 25-30 years of experience, they were having a lot of I know everything, you tell me, you suggest me, this is my problem, you tell me. That's how their starting session will be, right? So we have to be handling them in a different way. So my question is like, so if you are having certain things on suitability side, then please share it. Yes.
Let me look up. I'm taking your question, Lakshmi. I don't have anything readily in mind.
Sure, okay.
Let me look up if there is a guideline I can find on classification between support methodologies versus coaching. Okay.
Yeah.
I will try to figure out something that can.
Sure. Thank you.
No problem. You're welcome. Deepak, you have a question?
Sorry, I'm good. Thank you, Meghna.
Okay, all right. You just came on. I thought you unmuted yourself to ask something. Okay, the last point, maintain privacy of ICF members and use the member contact information only as authorized by ICF or ICF members. So when you sign on and you become an ICF member, you'll also get to see the member directory, program directory, which training schools and things like that. ICF is saying we publish this information in order to be transparent about who's our member, who are registered users, who are registered mentors, who are the registered training schools and so on. But please do not misuse this information just because it's available to all the members and it's been published by us on the website. Sorry, did I skip one? Conflict of interest. If there's a potential conflict of interest with any of the relevant parties, seek professional assistance or suspend temporarily or end the professional relationship. What does this mean? Don't end up having a fling with one of your clients, first of all.
Basically, if the coachee kind of catches feeling for you, you have to make a decision there.
Sorry, Nama, can you speak up a bit?
Ridu this side.
Were you sharing something, Nama?
No, not at all, not at all.
That's not you. Okay. Maybe there's something in the background there. Was there some? I thought I heard a lady's voice sharing. Okay, if there is a anticipated or a conflict of interest that we encounter while in the course of the engagement, either it needs to be resolved. Okay, ICF says either you seek assistance, suspend the coaching relationship temporarily until the problem is resolved, or end the professional relationship. Yeah, Mridu.
Yeah, I guess I was saying the similar thing that if the coachee kind of catches feelings for you, then you have to kind of make a decision there. Is that the right way to go ahead with?
Yeah. True.
So.
True, that's true. Everything that we know and the compass that we have must guide us in taking that decision. Okay, and lastly, we want to look at what is the guideline saying, what is the ethical standard talking about in terms of responsibility to the society, avoid discrimination. So it's this part is very heavily about respecting diversity and inclusion. Recognize and honor contributions and IP of others. So if I'm sharing a white paper, Lakshmi just asked me for a guideline, coaching versus other methodologies. I can share it with the group, but I must be upfront in saying, where did I pick up what is this paper that I am sharing and who has authored the paper? So if I'm using a model in coaching to explain something to the client, I must tell them that, look, this is growth versus fixed mindset. It comes from contribution of so-and-so. You're using this flow model. It comes from the contribution of so-and-so. If I'm sharing soft copy of a book or whatever, if it is unethical, do not do it. If you're allowed to share those resources, then share the due credit. Be honest about am honest and work within the recognized scientific standards, applicable subject guidelines, and boundaries of my competence when conducting and reporting research. So this is again applicable scientific standards and subject guidelines. If I am not trained on a psychometric instrument, okay, I cannot debrief it. MBTI is very clear. If you have not attended the certification program and you don't have the desired competency determined by MBTI, you cannot debrief their report. So I can't go to a client and say, okay, I know these 5 instruments, including MBTI, because that is not the applicable subject guideline. I have to represent the boundaries of my competence in line with ethically with what the subject guidelines are. Okay. And lastly, I'm aware of my and my clients' impact on society. I adhere to the philosophy of doing good versus avoiding the bad. Okay, again, something very profound coming in over here. It's not enough to not do the wrong thing. it's important as well to practice doing the good. The practicing right and contributing towards cultivating good is much bigger than simply just avoiding the bad and staying neutral. So we are all part of a society, as a community, as human beings, as a bigger, part of a bigger fabric. It's our responsibility to contribute. Yeah, Tyagarajan, if you don't do it, don't say it. All right, quickly coming to the summary of this module. Are you all with me so far? Ethical standards, guys, remember that this particular core competency has no markers. There are no qualifiers. If you are submitting a call for an ICF evaluation or you're getting assessed on a coaching recording, there are no markers to get you marks on ethical practice. Okay. The only thing that can happen is if you are violating any of these terms, ethical standards or the core competency descriptors, you can get yourself disqualifiers. There are no markers for this particular competency. It does not have PCC markers. So what we need to do is to apply the principles in all our coaching relationships, make clear coaching agreements prior in line with the ethical requirements, and fundamentally respect confidentiality.